Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting shortly. We're just sparing a few minutes to let the rest of the colleagues join. We will be starting in 2 minutes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse the delay. We anticipating more than 100 people that have registered for this webinar. So to safeguard time, for the interest of time, we would resume, and hopefully by the time the first speaker starts, they would have joined us at that time. My name is Luando Mleleni, and on behalf of the DVC Research and Innovation, Professor Joseph Franz, I'm thrilled to welcome you to our webinar on collective action for a better world. Prof. Franz will be joining us in due course. She's finished off an executive meeting. We are excited to have you join us as we embark on the journey that explores the profound impact of collaboration in shaping a better future on a global scale. So today we want to unite. If you look at the composition of our panelists, we want to unite under the banner of collective action and delving into the fundamental values of SDGs and transformative power that they hold. So as we navigate through this webinar, we aim to ignite conversation that will inspire positive change. Together we have a capacity and to better understand the essence of collaboration and its pivotal role in propelling us towards more sustainable and equitable futures. So we're hoping to unravel a thread of inclusivity, equity in higher education partnership. So join us as we envision a world where collaboration transcends boundaries and equality, where equality stands tall as the cornerstone of academic excellence and beyond. So this is about your opportunity to become an integral part of the global effort towards building a better tomorrow. with those words, colleagues, before I introduce the moderator, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us and welcome you. But most importantly, I would like to particularly extend a word of gratitude to our esteemed panelists. Thank you for joining us on this transformative path towards collective action and a brighter future of a more inclusive world. We don't take your commitment to this lightly. We're truly, truly, truly grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our moderator, Dr. Mohamed Jemilo. Dr. Mohamed Jemilo is a postdoctoral researcher within the Office of the DVC Research and Innovation within the University of the Western Cape. He's particularly focusing on social innovation for sustainable development. He holds a PhD in business management, particularly focusing on marketing and consumer behavior from the School of Business and Finance in the Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences at UWC. So his research interests include marketing, consumer behavior, sustainable halal food purchasing consumption, social entrepreneurship, tourism management, poverty and social development, and the application of sustainable development goals. Mohamed has authored and published 2 book chapters, several articles and research papers in peer-reviewed local and international journals and conferences. I now hand over to the capable hands of Dr. Jemilo. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mdleleni. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I feel very privileged to be the chosen moderator for this webinar, and I would like to extend my word of gratitude to the Office of the DVC, Research and Innovation, for providing me with such an opportunity. And before presenting our panelists, I would like just to remember that remind you that at the core of the Sustainable Development Goals require delving into various aspects such as environmental sustainability, social equity, and economic development. And we need, as a world, a collaborative effort to realizing these SDGs, because you have to address some interconnected challenges that the world is facing and that no single entity can tackle alone. So as such, government, businesses, civil society, academia, and even individuals need to work together to leverage the different resources, the different strengths in order to tackle these social, economic problems that we are facing. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist would be Dr. Cornelius Hagenmeyer, who is an international expert in the German and South African jurisdiction. Dr. Hagenmeyer has a PhD degree from the University of Cape Town. And after completing his German law degree at Humboldt University, he received other qualification, and he's also has an LLB and LLM degrees from South Africa. He's a non-practicing attorney in the High Court of South Africa and has served since 2023 as head of internalization at Miteda University of Applied Science, and is also a research fellow at the University of State. The second panelist would be Dr. Lauren Haywood. Dr. Lauren Haywood is a senior researcher at the CSIR, and she is working within the CSIR Ecosystem Service Impact Area. She holds a PhD in zoology and environmental science from the University of Witwatersrand, and is a specialist in assessment and reporting, risk management, corporate sustainability, and application of sustainable development goals. Her research area lies in the application of sustainability science toward the development of decision support that enable business to transform their current sustainability practices. Our third presenter and panelist would be Dr. Kenelwe Molosi France, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Botswana, and she has a PhD in adult and continuing education that she obtained in 2015 from the University of Glasgow. She was also a Fulbright visiting scholar at Penn State University in the USA. Her research interests are community-based participatory research, scholarship of teaching and learning in higher education, education for continuity development, indigenous minority issues, and gender issues in community development context. So without further ado, I would invite Dr. Cornelius Hagenmeyer, our first panelist, for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am just in the process of sharing my screen. Yes, you should be able to see my screen now. Is that the case? Colleagues, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Dr. Hagenmeyer.
Excellent. Can you see just the presentation or more than the presentation? Is it a proper picture?
Perhaps you can put it in the presentation mode, slideshow mode.
Will do. Yes, colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity. And first, I need to talk about my perspective. As the moderator rightly stated, I have a diverse background, and that is why I call myself a borderland dweller. I have spent more than 20 years living in South Africa, contributing both at a research-led university as well as at a comprehensive university. I was first based at the University of Venda, then at the University of the Free State, where I remain as a research fellow. Now I'm based at the Mittweida University of Applied Sciences in Germany, which again is a German University of Applied Sciences. So colleagues, I have seen the advantaged and the disadvantaged, the affluent and the resource-restricted backgrounds of university, and I have seen them in different continents. That is what really influences my thinking on higher education partnerships. In this presentation, I'm first going to expand a little bit on the role of higher education partnerships for attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Thereafter, I'm going to go into depth to discuss the concept of equality in higher education partnerships. I will briefly touch upon other concepts which are relevant to the discourse, including equity and the German concept of Augenhöhe or eyes level. And I shall close by touching on some strategies to attain equality, or also in a broader sense, fairness in higher education partnerships. So colleagues, what are higher education partnerships? There are different definitions, and there is no point in dwelling on definitions. I like best the very broad definition by Meringe and Witt: any formal or informal working together by two or more higher education entities in pursuit of common goals. And maybe also important to note that higher education partnerships come in many different facets, some of them being bilateral, some of them being multilateral, such as consortia or networks. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we see that higher education and partnerships play a pivotal role. Of course, we all know education is core to Sustainable Development Goal 4, but also we have Sustainable Development Goal 17, which relates specifically to partnerships for the goals, and in that also calls upon us to infuse the thinking and the values underlying the Sustainable Development Goals in the higher education partnership discourse. Sustainable Development Goal 17 calls for collective action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It stresses the importance of collaboration and cooperation for attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Higher education institutions are expected to be part of those who take this collective action. So this does not only mean that amongst ourselves and working together with other stakeholders in society, we need to partner, but I think it must also mean that in partnering, we lead by example and we demonstrate how sustainable development goals like attaining social justice can be infused in the work we do in partnerships. Colleagues, I am going, as was said in the introduction, to work with the concept of equality. Now, I want to say at the very beginning, and I will get back to that later in my presentation, that equality in partnerships, in higher education partnerships specifically, is a contested concept, but probably that is the case because it is little understood. Colleagues, gaining commitment on a global basis to equal and ethical higher education partnerships has been a quest in higher education for long. In 2015, the Nelson Mandela Bay Declaration on the Future of Internationalization was stating this. Nevertheless, there have been different trajectories in the discourse, and we have seen that sometimes even equality is not the preferred term. Now, colleagues, where does the confusion lie? The core confusion lies in that there are two basic conceptions of equality. There is, on the one hand, the formal conception of equality, which considers it as sameness. It is anchored in the procedural notion of justice, and it simply calls that similar things should be treated equal and dissimilar things different. However, it does not prescribe what the substance of that treatment should be. Very different is the substantive understanding of equality, which we, those of us who are based in South Africa, are familiar with because, for example, of the jurisprudence of our constitutional court. It refers to the notion that difference and diversity must be appreciated and equality of outcomes ensured. This also means that equality is a concept which has to be contextualized, and it is a concept which assists us in advancing the notion of being equally worth and helps us to overcome the sameness of treatment which is inherent to the formal understanding of equality. In other words, substantive equality is a transformative concept which, for example, in South Africa, assisted us in advancing affirmative action. Given that the time is very limited, I am going to jump directly into sharing some of the insights of a study which I undertook as part of my PhD some time ago on equality in partnerships. The results of this research, which I conducted on a global basis and in which 87 senior international officers from diverse universities participated, was that almost everyone agreed that equality would be a fundamental principle underlying international university partnerships. However, nobody understood the concept, and that got evident when I asked the next question in the survey and asked about the personal understanding of equality. Not a single participant answered the question. I also conducted qualitative research through case studies, which also confirmed that there is at present little understanding of the concept. Looking at the results of the empirical work in more detail, it became clear that the participants considered equality as a very important concern. They considered it prerequisite for successful university partnerships. However, there was no clear conception and nobody really grasped the meaning of what equality in higher education partnerships should be all about. So that made it very evident that there was a high urgency in formulating a concept which would be useful for practice. So I went about working with the jurisprudence of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, which has been expanding a lot on substantive equality. I infused the results of the empirical research, and I proposed in my thesis a four-dimensional understanding of substantive equality as the basis on which we could work towards equal higher education partnerships. So what are those four dimensions? The first dimension is the redistributive dimension. This dimension relates to how resources should be allocated in higher education partnerships, and how that what the partnership benefit is should be allocated to those who are part of the partnership. Resources should be allocated in such a way that everyone needs to make a contribution which is equally meaningful, considering the context of the partner. In other words, it is not what is it in rent and cents, but what does it mean to make this contribution. Second, it also encompasses the notion that the benefits of partnerships should be shared in such a way that the partnerships allow the partners to achieve their sometimes different goals to the same extent. A second dimension I'm proposing is the recognition dimension. Here, it is all about the dignity, the self-worth, and of participants in partnership processes, and about the value which universities or other entities carry. The proposition here is that one should state categorically that all partners recognize and affirm their equal worth and the equal worth of all those who participate in partnership activities in all spheres of the collaboration. Furthermore, it is about non-discrimination and discrimination, again, both at the individual level of those participating in the partnerships, as well as at the level of universities, where there should be no discrimination or lesser treatment of any partner, no matter in which context or how well-resourced or experienced that partner may be. Then participation, what I call the participation dimension, is critical. Here, the call is for open and transparent communication. It is for decision-making processes which afford equal weight to all partners' voices and ensure that also the minority views are considered in the decision-making. It requires partners to work jointly to overcome hegemonic, colonial, or paternalistic tendencies in the collaboration. Lastly, there is a transformative dimension to substantive equality in partnership, and that is really about recognizing that partnerships between diverse partners are valuable in themselves, that the diversity they bring actually has a transformative effect on all partners. Colleagues, in addition to the 4 dimensions of equality, which have been proposed in another context by Sandra Friedman, in which I developed further to suit the higher education partnership context, I propose in my thesis that it is critical to also have a value foundation for higher education partnerships. And I think that also aligns very closely with SDG thinking. Amongst the values which I'm proposing are mutuality, transparency and accountability, trust, equity and fairness, academic freedom, promotion of education, research and development, and Ubuntu. You will note that with Ubuntu, 1 is in the canon, which is not often mentioned when we talk about higher education partnerships. Colleagues, I think it is critical that we start taking philosophies and concepts emanating from the global South and infuse them in the global discourse, because the South has a lot to offer to the world, and by being self-assured to include Southern concepts, we can make at least a contribution towards decolonizing internationalization. Colleagues, I briefly want to touch upon equity, which sometimes is demonstrated as an alternative to equality in partnerships. It denotes a long-standing concern in higher education regarding the extent to which the distribution of opportunities to participate is the same for all. One could also sum it up in a word, and one could say equity is all about fairness in partnerships. Colleagues, equity in itself is a very important concept, and I do not think that it is necessary to construe an artificial dichotomy between equity and equality. In my work, I have included equity as one of the values which should underlie higher education partnerships. It is not that a partnership where the partners say we want to use the term equity is less fair than where partners say it is based on equality. However, I personally think that substantive equality offers us a much better way of understanding the different dimensions of equality in partnerships. And what it can do is it can help us to advance truly equitable and equal partnerships across countries in higher education. Just to show how rich the discourse is, I could not help it but throw a term in from my own mother country, Germany, Augenhöhe, which you could translate as at eyes level. This concept encompasses, again, fairness, equality, transparency, respect, communication, trust, shared values, and mutual appreciation. Colleagues, it is also a useful concept. There is probably not the single and only concept one can use to advance fair partnerships. However, we need to follow one course if we are structuring a partnership, and one of the very good ways of doing it is applying the thinking of substantive equality. It can help us give structure. Nevertheless, all that is meaningless if we have no strategies to advance equality in partnerships. To me, the most important one is the agency to participate as an equal in the knowledge production process. It is, and that is for all of us.
I would like to remind Dr. Hagenmeier that you have 1 minute left.
No problem, I'm almost done. That means that we should, empowered, enter into partnership discourses and be aware of our self-worth. Colleagues, I want to just state that fair partnerships are critical. A basis of trust is critical. We need to advance them. I personally propose to use the concept of substantive equality, but I also want to leave you with the notion that no black and white simplistic approach will help us to overcome inequalities. This is a very complex subject matter and takes a deep discussion to really advance substantively. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
But thank you very much, Dr. Cornelis Hagenmeyer, for this beautiful presentation. Before moving on to the next speaker, Dr. Lauren Hayward, I would like to remind participants that they can drop questions on the topic or share their experiences on the chat box. And if they would like to drop a question, they should indicate to whom the question is addressed, whether it is panelist 1, panelist 2, or panelist 3. All right. I would like to cordially invite Dr. Lauren Haywood for her presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just setting up my screen. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you should also be able to see my screen. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to give or be able to talk to you today. Today, I'm going to give you just a brief insight into some research that we did. We're looking at the SDGs in South Africa and investigating the need for multi-stakeholder partnerships. So it was really in 2016 that my colleagues and I, just as the SDGs sort of came into effect, really wanted to start understanding exactly what the SDG 17 meant and how this would go about and how this SDG would play out. Knowing that SDG 17 really looks at advocating for greater cooperation between public, private, and third sector organizations. So we can see that often SDG 17 is ranked the lowest of priorities of all the SDGs, where in fact SDG 17 is in fact the one SDG that we need to really focus on, as it is critical that we have partnerships in order for us to achieve all the other SDGs. So all the other SDGs really rely on partnerships, and this will lead to the achievement of other SDGs. So without partnerships that cross-cut the geographical boundaries and sectors, we will not be able to implement the SDGs. So what this SDG really is saying is partnerships are not only a principle that underpins all the SDGs, but it also is considered a key mechanism for the implementation, achievement, and advancement of the SDGs. But in all honesty, what are partnerships? Are they just one or two or maybe even three people coming together? Well, yeah, that of course is exactly what a partnership is. But actually, in all honesty, a partnership is a framework, a physical framework that facilitates multiple people being able to work and collaborate together. And we have different names to what we give what we call partnerships. Some of you will make use of these names because they're all trying to achieve different things, but commonly we can call partnerships networks, coalitions, movements, strategic alliances, co-funding, which is also a type of partnership, public-private partnerships, collective impacts, platforms, or even programs. But the thing is that all these partnerships, whatever you want to call them, have one thing in common, and that is the sharing of resources to achieve a common goal or a shared interest, which in the case of the SDGs is a prosperous economy, a thriving society, and a healthy environment. And in most instances, this is because issues around sustainability are really, really complex and too large scale for a single entity to actually achieve alone. So we need to actually engage in partnerships and get people together. So the resources that I'm talking about that we have to share, what are they? Well, they can be vast and vary, include things such as finances, they include knowledge, people or resources, skills, the skills that people bring to the table, different perspective, different ideas, and even things such as creativity. But not only is partnerships about sharing resources, it's also about sharing other things, such as accountability, sharing in the risks that are associated with the partnership, sharing in the leadership so that we can answer the questions and get to a common goal, and of course, sharing in the benefits. So from an SDG perspective, partnerships, mainly that of multi-stakeholder partnerships, are uniquely positioned towards unpacking and defining innovative solutions that can ultimately drive local, national, and global transformations towards achieving the SDGs. So the SDGs really are a conglomerate of social, environmental, and governance aspirations and desires that work together to make the world a better place that we live in. So in this diagram, which was compiled by Stats SA, it really illustrates the interconnected relationships between all the SDGs, and that their goals, how the goals actually interact with each other, and that no one goal can be achieved without affecting or impacting on another one. In conjunction, the interconnectedness specifically highlight that there are a number of different nexuses that exist within the SDGs. I'm sure a number of you know these nexuses, but commonly there are education, gender, and health nexus, the energy, food security, and poverty eradication nexus, the water, energy, and food nexus, and climate, land, energy, and water nexus. But given the global and catastrophic impact of humans, it is now more important than ever that we work towards a common and measurable goal that cannot be achieved unless we work as a collective. So together with various groups of stakeholders coming from different backgrounds with different resources that can leverage their respective strengths and resources to drive a meaningful change and pave the way for sustainable and a resilient world. So in the research that we did, we tried to unpack, understand what the different stakeholders are and would be that it would be included or should be included into multiple stakeholder partnerships, and what do they actually bring to the party so that we can able to achieve these goals. So we put together a list of 5 different clusters. I'm sure many of you are aware of these now, since it's been numerous years since the SDGs have been in effect. But the first one that we felt was really important in the partnerships was the UN cluster. We commonly call it the UN cluster, which are basically intergovernmental organizations. So all the different UN sort of organizations, and they are responsible for spearheading and coordinating the SDGs, including the implementation, monitoring, reporting, and review. Secondly, another very important cluster would be the government cluster. So the South African government, which by virtue of their governance and implementation, mandates for a critical role in implementing the SDGs in South Africa by providing the enabling environment. They have the authority to enact policies, regulations, incentives that shape the behavior of all the other stakeholders towards sustainable practices. They can establish frameworks for environmental protection, they can set emission targets, and they provide funding and support for sustainable initiatives. They are responsible for monitoring the performance of the country towards meeting the SDGs. The third set of or cluster of stakeholders would be that of the civil society cluster. And this cluster has a significant role towards advocating for environmental and social causes, driving awareness and mobilizing communities and holding business and government accountable for their actions. So civil societies and NGOs can bring a much deeper subject matter expertise to certain sort of partnerships. They can form grassroots networks and strong moral compass to collective partnerships. Another, or the fourth type of cluster, would that be associated around the business cluster or the private sector. And they have a key role to play towards driving sustainable practices and innovation towards across the sectors in which they work. So they're really about implementing actions towards achieving the SDGs. So they can implement sustainable measures within their own operations across the supply chains that they work in their products and services, and basically drive positive environmental and social impacts while realizing their long-term business benefits. The last but not least, the cluster that often sometimes tends to get neglected sometimes is the R&D cluster, or the research and development cluster, which really incorporates and gathers science and academia, because we have a specific, I say we, since most of us here come from universities, have a specific role towards contributing to the SDGs through training, skills, development, research, and innovation. So our research basically concluded, or actually before I say that, this diagram here also shows, highlights to you the different roles, or how those will interact with each other to meet the SDGs. And we should see these clusters as sort of cogs. The cogs all work together to achieve the SDGs. So if you sort of don't have one in the cog, it might not, the cog or the relationship might not work. So this diagram really illustrates that COGS need to work together to achieve the objectives. So as stakeholders across all those different groups of stakeholders, we need to work together with a common goal of achieving the SDGs. It doesn't mean that each and every single one of those stakeholders groups needs to be in a partnership, but there's an understanding that it needs to include more than just one set of stakeholders. So we concluded our research that partnerships could be facilitated and strengthened through the establishment and maintenance of functional formal platforms or networks through which stakeholders could interact and network and share experiences. Such platforms could be established at different levels, such as municipal level, provincial level, even national level, basically for the ease of access to different stakeholders operating at different levels. We argue that any healthy relationship, be it between individuals, organizations, or different groups in society, is based fundamentally on trust and confidence. So any partnership established across the SDGs stakeholder spectrum that I just presented needs to be accountable as well as people and planet-centered. So if any of you are engaging with the SDGs, you will know that there already exists an international partnership platform. The UN Department of Economics and Social Affairs hosts this platform, and it's commonly known as the SDG Action Platform. So this platform serves as an online global registry of voluntary commitments and partnerships that support the implementation of the SDGs. However, in a research paper, which I've just given you the name of this research paper, which was published in 2023, they investigated the partnerships and concluded that on this platform, there are over 7,000 entities available on the website, of which 15% of them are duplicates. Only 473 of those 7,000 entities actually bear any resemblance to what a multi-stakeholder platform would, or multi-stakeholder partnership would actually look like. Of these, only half are actually active. And they also concluded that of these platforms or partnerships, they mostly comprise of international organizations and national governments. So they fall short of actually including any partnerships that include business, civil society, and academia. So the multi-stakeholder platform partnerships, mainly connect environmental and social SDGs, notably that of climate change, biodiversity, and health concerns. And there's less focus on the economic goals, addressing the drivers of unsustainable behavior. So from their perspective, the recommendations that they're actually highlighting from their 2023 paper is that the partnership platforms, such as the SDG Action Platform here, more research on how to harness potential synergies across the SDGs in multiple stakeholder partnerships, and more attention to meta-government governance of these platforms at the UN level is needed. So basically, I'm going to wrap up and just in conclusion say that in September last year, 2023, the high-level political forum on sustainable development under the auspice of the UN General Assembly convened their second SDG summit. This was the midpoint of implementation of the SDGs, or Agenda 2030. The progress suggests that basically since 2019, there's been a huge struggle towards making progress on the SDGs, and this obviously was fueled by the COVID pandemic. But we see that at midpoint now, of the 140 targets associated with the SDGs, only 12% are on track to be met, which is very, very, very low, and more than half or moderate or are seriously off track, with 30% showing no change or even regressing below the 2015 baseline. So this is extremely concerning. This again brings us to the fact that after this 2030 mid-year review that happened, there's a greater call for the UN, government, business, civil society, and other organizations to really prioritize the factors that are needed to accelerate multi-stakeholder collaboration for greater contribution towards us trying in any way to meet the 2023 global agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lauren Haywood, for a beautiful presentation. I would like to remind the audience that they could type their question in the chat box, and the panelists would attend to them at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to hereby invite Dr. Kenelwe Molosi France. I would like to formally invite Dr. Kenelwe Molosi France to present a paper. Thank you.
Hello, colleagues. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Dr.
Okay, thank you. Today I'm going to be presenting to you about a topic or a presentation I titled Collaborative Research for a Better World, Hopes and Realities. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda marks a new era for collaborative efforts, which are meant to advance sustainability and prosperity for all. And I guess all of us, we agree that with the Sustainable Development Goals, is a collective call for everyone. That is why collaborative efforts, research partnerships are very key so that the Sustainable Development Goals may be effectively achieved. So the Agenda 2030 is centered on the 5 Ps of sustainable development, and among the 5 Ps is partnerships. It's partnerships that lead to the sustainable implementation of SDGs globally. And when you look at Sustainable Development Goal number 17, it specifically focuses on partnerships as a way to strengthen the means of implementation for sustainable development. And this tells us that there is hope that the partnerships will avail much, will bear more fruit when research, specifically in higher education institutions, is done in a collaborative manner. So when you look at the SDG 17, among its target is knowledge sharing and cooperation for access to science, technology, and innovation. Now, this target seeks to enhance the global north-south, the south-south, and the triangular regional and international cooperation and access to science, technology, and innovation, and enhance knowledge sharing on mutually agreed terms. Mark that term, mutually agreed terms. So these partnerships are not only important for the achievement of the SDGs, they are also critical because we are living in the 4th age era where new ideas and knowledge are developed by networks rather than individuals or institutions or single nations. So collaborations are very, very key. However, when you consider the limited research funds and resources in the global south institutions, research collaborations are mostly seen as a way to contribute to international research knowledge and innovation. Because when you look at most of the global south higher education institutions, they do not have enough access to research funds, or the institutions, they do not have, sometimes proper instrumentations, expertise for research. Now, even though much hope and expectations are put on collaborations and partnerships, in reality, there are instances of domination and dependence that defeats the very purpose of existence of collaborations and partnerships between the global south and global north universities. So this is well noted within the global south-north research collaborations in higher education institutions. And I will later on share with you my experience in terms of the research collaborations between the global south and global north research institutions. Now, research collaborations for the achievement of the SDGs. I guess we all agree that the SDGs require scholarship and research for them to be effectively achieved. For instance, when you look at maybe the goal that talks about health for all, we definitely need research because things continue to change. Information is changing and research. We need to continuously involve ourselves in research. And the higher education institutions, they are usually the common research institutions that will help to contribute towards the sustainable development goals. So collaboration in research between institutions of higher learning is very key, as collaboration is about a process of shared creation where two or more individuals with complementary skills come together to create a shared understanding about a phenomenon. So universities in the South, in the global South and global North, are able to connect because they complement each other. It might be in terms of skills, it might be in terms of expertise, it might be in terms of even resources that are available. So these research collaborations for the institutions that are in the global South, they help those institutions to be able to contribute towards the creation of knowledge and the achievement of the sustainable development goals. Because if you look at the funding in the global South, is very much limited. And if this research collaborations are not there, it was going to be very hard for most of the universities in the global South to contribute towards research and contribution towards scholarship in general. So for institutions in the global North, these collaborations, they give an opportunity to gain access to knowledge in the global South, because there are issues that exist in the global South that might not be existing in the global North. And these collaborations, they help the global North universities or higher education institutions to collaborate and gain access to knowledge. One example that we may want to talk to is maybe malaria. Malaria is very common in Africa. So if the global North institutions wants to contribute towards the fight of malaria and gain more information about malaria, it's only fair for them to go where that information is, which is in the global South. And as such, they'll be able to collaborate with institutions in the global South. And while these institutions from the global North are gaining access to knowledge, the institutions in the global South, they are gaining access to expertise, they are gaining access to resources, such as funding. Now, I'm looking at this issue using the theory of collaborative advantage and the post-colonial theory. These two theories, when they are used in combination, they illuminate that although collaboration between higher education institutions of the global South and North may strengthen the capacity of African institutions to play part in the sustainable development goals, on the other hand, these collaborations may be an instance of domination by the global North institutions. So from the post-colonial perspective, the mentality in which the institutions have when getting into collaboration is highly influenced by the contemporary remnants of established patterns of power between the colonizer and the colonized. So the colonial of power is reflected by the domination, which is always exerted by the global North partner institution and influencing the direction the collaboration should take. Maybe some of you are asking themselves, why am I saying this? I'll explain this at a later stage. Now, when you look at the collaborative advantage theory as espoused by Hexem and Wangen, it admits that normally when collaborations are made, it is because there is real gain, there is real benefit for the two parties that are going to be working together, or three or whatever. But the main reason why we should enter into collaborations or collaborative research is because there is a benefit. As I mentioned earlier, for the South, for the global South, maybe the advantage is that they are benefiting in terms of expertise, instruments, and other resources. While on the other hand, perhaps for the global North, they are having more access to knowledge and other things. However, that is what is called collaborative advantage. However, even though the critical idea of collaborations, of collaborative research in higher education institutions, even though the main aim is benefit, these institutions, in practice, in reality, the results of a collaborative arrangement are surrounded with stories of disappointment, which according to the collaborative advantage theory is called the collaborative inertia. Now, since the global South institutions are faced with challenges such as funds, specialized expertise, specialized machinery, etc., these research collaborations, they provide a collaborative advantage in that regard. And conversely, with their collaborative advantage, universities in the global North see these collaborations as their obligation to contributing to knowledge production and conceivably to addressing global issues and other confronting issues that affect the world at large. And in our instance, specifically to contribute towards the sustainable development goals. So when you look at the theory of collaborative advantage, it uses themes to help us understand collaboration and the dynamics of collaboration. So when you look at trust, trust as conceptualized by Covey 2006 is confidence in the integrity and ability of others, and a relative lack of suspicion. So the moment you get into a collaboration, there should be trust. You should be having a confidence in the integrity of the other collaborator and their ability. However, mostly there is no trust in the collaborations between the global South and global North institutions of higher learning when it comes to research collaborations. And it's mostly the African collaborators who are not trusted. So lack of trust in the collaborators from the global South has been emphasized through the funding bureaucracies. You find that when you are with collaborating with a colleague from the global North, the expectations that are expected from you when you are from the global South, they are not as stringent as for the one that is in the global North. So even though these funding bureaucracies we know are meant to prevent corruption or inefficiency, some of the funding procedures can be too demanding on the partner from the global south and less demanding on the other collaborators. Now, let's ask ourselves, is the mistrust justified? Yes. Yes. Because when you look at Africa as a continent, is marred with issues of corruption, money laundering, and that might be influencing the funders who are mostly in the global north not to trust. So that's the question we should be asking ourselves. Is it because of the corruption issues and the money laundering issues that are common in Africa? Or is it just issues of power? And when we talk about power here, we are talking about power in terms of relational power, that is power over. Now, as Grill, as quoted by Horst Femke, has argued that Africa has taught the chronicles to be cautious. I guess this is saying to us, because of our environment, because of our issues that concern corruption, money laundering, and stuff like that, that might have caused funders to be cautious when they're dealing with us. Now, another theme is shared ownership and power sharing. So distribution of power is one of the aspects discussed as problematic within collaboration by the collaborative advantage theory. Without shared power, research partnerships are simply ways for the global north to control what happens in the global south. Because you find that it's those with money that control the direction the research should be taking. And those that do not have money, they just have to flow with the flow and take orders. So power in this instance, like I said earlier on, is in a relational sense, power over others. So partnerships between the global north and the global south are faced with power imbalances that usually privilege the former over the other. Now, this power discrepancy can be understood in terms of new imperialism, whereby the North extends its power and recolonizes the global South, creating intellectual dependency. So the capacity of this global South partners is always built on the assumption that they do not know and that Northern partners are superior to their counterparts, which thus creates a paternalistic kind of capacity building and global North-South dependency. Dependency in the sense that sometimes in the global South, you have to wait to be funded from the global North for you to be able to undertake research. So the power dynamics are also illuminated through the funding processes. Research funding agencies usually prefer to fund collaborations between the global South and the global North institutions through research institutions or academics based in the global North. And this is very common. It's very common. You find that there will be a funder and the funder will be saying, the PI should be somebody from the global North. And it is common for calls for research grant applications to indicate that the principal investigator should be from the global North-based institution. And from the start, that on its own it puts the principal investigator as the center of power. Mind you, we are talking about relational power. So those who are invited, you are just kept at the periphery, taking instruction from the one who has applied for funds.
Dr. Molusi Franz, you have only 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay. Now let me share with you my experience before I go. I was involved in a research collaboration, University of Botswana and a university in the global north. I had to drop out because the regulations were very different. My institutions had different funding processes, and that institution had different funding processes. And as such, they wanted, for instance, they are using the arrears method, whereby my institution will give me funds and we will later claim from them. Then my institution was saying, no, we don't have funds kept somewhere for that purpose. You have to get advance payment that is deposited with the University of Botswana account. That is when we will always be giving you the money from the account. Now, the way forward, I guess it's high time that African institutions and governments and other stakeholders should pump money into research so that these collaborations, when we collaborate, we are collaborating on equal ground, because it appears that it's mostly those with money that do talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Molusi Franz, for your insightful presentation. We have a couple of questions in the webinar chat, but before addressing them, I have a few questions of my own for the panelists. My question to Dr. Hagenmeyer, how do we bring community-based organization together how do we bring the community-based organization together to leverage resources and fulfill the purpose of collective collaboration for a sustainable future? How do we come together and do that? My question to Dr. Lauren Haywood, you spoke about the importance of partnership. So how do we cooperatively produce the solution that we need in order to make sure that all the 140 targets that you mentioned could be salvaged and to build a better and more equitable world? How do we simplify the way the SDGs are communicated to reach a broader audience and inspire collective action? And finally, my question to Dr. Kenelwe is, you spoke about various issues such as collective inertia and issues of mistrust and paternalism in research collaboration. So my question to you is, how do we ensure that institutions from the global north and the global south work together to leverage these resources and avoid collaborative inertia? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me start with this question, but giving the caveat, this is not an area which I have really conducted research on. Community-based organizations, I think, are a feature of South African civil society, which is quite unique. So it is unique, and I think it would probably be for Dr. Haywood to speak more to it. But just speaking from my perspective in higher education research, first to say what is very developed in South African higher education thinking is the concept of community engagement and the practice of community involvement. So to link it back to the notion of complementarity, which Dr. Haywood voiced earlier, but also to the thinking on equality in higher education partnerships. This is, for example, one of the areas where the North stands to benefit from the South. Our ethics of community engagement in South Africa particularly, where I had the privilege, without becoming expert, being part of some community engagement international projects, is that we have expertise in working with communities. We have developed protocols, sometimes lacking in the North. And I must say, it is for us to not enter into partnerships with a deficit perspective, but to enter into partnerships if we are based in the Global South, in that we, with self-esteem, state what it is that we have to contribute and demand our place as equal partners. If that is not possible, in the last instance, yes, and I understand you, Dr. Molosi-Franz, there may be an instance where you may want to withdraw, but most importantly, I find that we argue from the outset our case, demand our place, and that at different levels, governmental, funding agency, and university, as well as individual levels. So just a few reflections on those points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hagen.
If I can move on to my question, I think the question you asked me was a rather a complicated and challenging question, because if I had the answer to that question, I think the world's problems would be solved. But unfortunately, I don't have it. I can only suggest that, you know, in moving forward, we really need to acknowledge that as much as we are talking about partnerships and partnerships being essential for us to meet the SDGs or any type of goals, that, you know, all types of partnerships move in that direction. You know, we tend to look at those partnerships being really big ones and looking at the, you know, UNs or the Global South, Global North contributing to the Global South. But we really, I think, to get down to the grassroots is to look at the partnerships that actually communicate and engage with communities. So what I'm saying is that local level type of partnerships are what's really fundamental to making the changes that we're wanting to see, specifically with some of the SDGs. We want to see that communities have better access to water, to education and things like that. And we're definitely seeing, you know, companies, whether they be mining companies, working in communities, are putting the efforts in to commit to meeting those SDGs and to contribute towards those communities that they engage with. For me, I think one of the biggest challenges is that often that information is not reflected back into our national reporting. You know, the SDGs are specifically addressing countries, and that the reports we see are for country levels. But what's happening is a lot of companies, for example, civil societies are engaging in different partnerships, engaging in different goals, but how to get that information about what they're doing and how they're contributing to the national level. So there's this breakdown in the communication or the data there. So for example, in the mining sector, how can the mining sector as itself collect data that shows that from their perspective, what they are doing to contribute to the SDGs? So maybe countries might be doing slightly better in their meeting their targets, but we're not seeing it at the local level. We're not actually picking up the data that's coming at the local level. We're seeing it at a national level. So what I'm trying to say there is that that not only are partnerships important, and we've seen partnerships happen, but and contributions to the SDGs, but where and how can we make better roles to get the data that's collected so that we can infuse it into our national reporting. And how do we make the SDGs simpler so people can understand it? Well, I think you don't necessarily have to understand the SDGs 1 to 7, so 1 to 17 and the different targets. I think as every day, as people on the ground, we're experiencing it. I mean, more and more we're dealing with climate change issues, more and more we're dealing with biodiversity loss, more and more we're dealing with poverty, etc. So we don't need to make it simpler. We just now need to make sure that we are able to, at the local, national, and international level, start addressing those concerns. And also making sure that as we move forward in the next, I don't know what the next cycle after the SDGs will be, that we start to also combine the different policies. So we've got SDGs driving something, we've got UN Compact driving something, we've got the IPC driving something, we've got the Global Biodiversity Framework driving. We need to start integrating these so that everyone starts talking the same language. There's not so many different goals and targets we're trying to achieve, but one simple target, and that is prosperous well-being for ourselves and a healthy environment. I can talk about this forever. There's just the complexities of the issues are really quite intense. But I think the complexities on themselves are not that hard to unpack if we just start talking to each other and working from a local perspective all the way up to the national perspective.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haywood. Thank you so much for this contribution.
Okay, should I go on?
Yes, you may go on.
Yes, my question, I think there are a lot of things that can be done, but when you look at where we are at this point in time, it's a matter of, the PES talks, right? And perhaps that's where we should be starting. I know most of the global South institutions, we cannot resist, even in instances where you see that from the start, you are kept at the periphery. But you cannot refuse, because if you refuse, where are you going to get the funding from? Now, I think it has to start with our governments, our stakeholders, and the higher educations and research institutions in the global South, emphasizing research funding. That's where we should start. So that when we enter the game, at least in terms of funds, we are more like at the same level. Money talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few questions in the webinar chat. The first one is addressed to Dr. Hagenmeyer. Is the contribution of SDGs to the decolonization of partnerships and higher education evident or not? The second question, all right.
Yeah, no, I can take them together. Is the second one the one about breaking down the mindsets?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. No, let me deal with the two questions. First, are the SDGs making an impact? Well, I haven't undertaken research to measure that, but from experience, yes, I think SDGs have enriched the discourse. No, I don't think it means that all challenging power dynamics are overcome. We are in a complex landscape. I don't want to make the picture too bleak. I have found enough and been part of enough equal collaborations between the North and the South. I have seen unequal collaboration and discrimination of researchers as well. Both happens, and I think what the SDGs have done is to make a contribution in rethinking issues of justice. Second, and I read out the question, how do we break down the old mindsets of making a factory model kind of approach of schooling and research at universities? How do you see us moving away from those old mindsets of one size fits all that are not really working to a more personalized system? Colleagues, concerning this question and all questions relating to relational issues and partnerships, I think we need to make the start in our sphere of influence. And it comes at different levels. We need to be outspoken. We need to be self-assured in negotiating. We need to be bold. There is, again, no simple answer as to how we can overcome old and stiff mindsets. But it depends on us to work in our sphere of influence, to call a spade, a wrong, a right, and work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you, Dr. Hagenmeyer. There are two questions for Dr. Haywood. The first one, how do you foresee the role of governmental agencies, civil society organizations, and private sector entities in fostering effective multi-stakeholder partnership to address the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically within the context of South Africa?
So I think that's also an interesting question. If it was as easy as the framework that I presented, i.e., government provides the enabling environment, civil society provides the advocacy, and business and implements the actions to address it, then we would have solved that problem. But I think the issue is why there is a lack of relationships or partnerships. And I think it boils down to, specifically in South Africa, for example, and it was mentioned earlier, issues around trust. There's a lack of trust between businesses themselves. They don't obviously sometimes want to trust each other, and also a lack of trust amongst businesses, for example, and government, because of issues around corruption and power. So, and that's a very, very interesting challenge for us in South Africa. We know that's very rife in our country. So how do we start to address those issues? Yeah, I don't have the answer to that question. It's very, very complicated. But I think if we can deal with that, we're one step closer. But the partnerships are there. They are being more enforced, and some of them, and some are different for certain different companies. Could be talking about the business sector here. Those relationships exist because of regulation being there. They've been regulated to provide the information, and as such, it's been regulated to address issues. And also from a business perspective, if you're wanting to now also be more competitive with other companies, you're going to start being more forward thinking and start to address issues around SDGs, because people and companies customers are looking at producing or buying from companies that are more responsible. So then you're going to start looking at what I can do to make sure I address the SDGs, and you're going to start seeing that it's not necessarily myself who can address them because it's complicated. Then you're going to look at other companies and maybe in the same sector or along your supply chain, how you can partner together to contribute towards those SDGs. So I think there's different drivers. There's the issue around trust. It's a complicated one, but in terms of the business sector, we might see that those partnerships are going to start emerging more and more now, due to consumers and customers wanting more and more responsible practices.
Thank you very much. The second question, how do we provide sustainable strategies across supply chains to lighten and lessen the constant need to source funding?
Sustainable strategies across supply chains. Well, that is definitely some work that we are currently working on here at the CSR. I think some of the things now is mostly sure. Regulation is definitely one of them, but I think there is a definite drive, like I said on my previous question, for in terms of what your consumers are requesting from you. So that's going to drive the different views and points and different strategies. And I think globally too, there is different pressures being brought down, specifically if you're looking at, you know, in the plastic sector and things like that. You've seen a lot of more legislation, for example, wanting you to be joined to be different producers, different materials into your products and things like that. So that kind of pressure is going to help drive those strategies. Can you just remind what was the second part of the question? Or is it in the actual text?
How do you provide sustainable strategies across supply chain to lighten and lessen the constant need to source funding?
Sourcing funding. Well, that is our own business as well. We're forever wanting to source funding. I don't know how to answer to that question. Funding is always going to be a problem. However, I do know that the more that you're addressing sustainability issues, the more opportunities and chances you're going to get to get funding. So it's a double-edged sword here. You're going to, how do I do this? How do I get the strategies and how do I get more funding? But if I do the strategies, I probably can get more funding. So yeah, that's challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Haywood. I have one question here for Dr. Molosi Franz. Thank you, Dr. Molosi Franz, for your presentation. My question is, what strategies do you suggest for fostering more balanced and equitable global South-North research collaborations within higher education institutions, considering the inherent power dynamics and inequalities that often characterize these partnerships?
It's answered, isn't it? It's the question that you asked.
Indeed, but it is a different person that posed the question. So maybe
Yeah, he's
just add
answered.
more.
No, there's
Yes.
there's nothing more to add. I'm going to repeat what I previously said, honestly. Do you want me to answer again?
Yes, we would love you to add
okay,
more
okay,
on the question.
okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to say the same thing that I said. That one of the strategies is to emphasize research such that the government and the research institutions and these institutions, they can pump money into research such that when the researchers from the global south collaborate with researchers from the global north, at least in terms of money, they've contributed. You know very well that even you, when you visit some people and you don't even have a penny to your name, you don't feel good. You don't even feel confident. And we can't even trust you. Now, I'm saying one of the things or one of the start off points maybe is to make sure that even us, we have our own money. This will also help prevent the intellectual dependency that we usually have because we don't have money. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Would some participant want to ask the question directly? I think we do not have any other question. I would like to, in a couple of minutes, I think there is one attendee that is raising a hand. Yes. Nosipo Makoto. You've muted your mic, Nosipo.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, I'm a pharmacy student, and I was just wondering, in terms of collaborative partnership within the Global South in research, how common is it? And perhaps if there are hindrances, what are those?
Do you please specify to which panelist is your question addressed to?
Dr. Melissa France.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you,
question,
Nosipo.
Nosipo. The collaborations between the South are definitely there. They are there. And in terms of challenges that I foresee with them, it still goes back to the issue of funds. Because I think mostly in Africa, we don't have much funding to fund research. And that, I think, is a challenge when it comes to driving the South-South research partnerships, but they are there. And I want to imagine that, although I'm not, I haven't been in a collaborative research with, which I would say it's South-South, but I think it will have its own challenges other than this other specific challenges that maybe stem from the colonial mentality and stuff. But then again, I imagine that whoever has brought money there might be feeling that, you know what, I have the purse, and therefore I am in control. I think that is why the collaborative advantage theory tells us that there is always collaborative inertia when there is collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molosi France. I think I will just wrap up by thanking all the panelists, and I would provide a short summary of the different interventions. Dr. Agenmeier presented the paper on the reality concept, ensuring that higher education partnership involve unequal universities, and spoke about the reality concept of equality in international university partnerships. The speaker said that while equality is commonly cited as a core principle, it is not yet clearly defined in academic discourse. The author also developed, as part of his PhD, four-dimensional conception of equality in higher education partnerships. He spoke about value foundation, redistributive dimension, recognition dimension, participation dimension, and transformative dimension. And lastly, the author spoke about the German equivalent that they use is Eigenhohe, that include issues such as fairness, equality, transparency, and so forth. Our second speaker spoke about the importance of partnership, and especially goal 17, which is the most important goal, partnership of all the goals. spoke about the interconnectedness of all the nexuses around the SDG, and that there are 5 key clusters that need to work together to achieve the SDGs. And the author provided us with some very interesting information. The key takeaway is that of the 140 targets around the SDGs, only 12% are on track. More than half of them are moderately or severely off track, and around 30% of those targets have seen no movement or have regressed. So this is the key takeaway from the presentation. Thank you. Lastly, Dr. Kenelwe Molosi France spoke about research collaboration for the achievement of SDGs. She spoke about the North-South and the South-South collaboration, and that the principal impetus is actually for institutions in the Global South is actually access to funding for African researchers. She also spoke about the conceptual frameworks that she used, theory of collaborative advantage and post-colonialism theory. So then ensued a discussion about how the Global South will actually benefit from research collaboration in terms of expertise, instrument, and fundings, and the Global North in terms of knowledge. However, there are some power play involved. She mentioned collaborative inertia and issues such as mistrust in the research collaboration between the Global North and the Global South. And lastly, in her intervention, she said that we need to emphasize on research fund from the Global South to prevent intellectual dependency. So this is in sum, the key takeaways from the 3 presentations that we have. I would like to thank the panelists for their expertise and for their hands-on approach, and thank the DVC Research and Innovation for this opportunity. Thank you. I would like to hand over to Dr. Lwando Mdleleni for closure.
Thank you so much to the program director for sailing the ship to where it is now. We truly appreciate the work that you've done. Colleagues, as we draw to close, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who has joined us today for this collective action for better world. Your participation and engagement has been instrumental in making this webinar a sounding success. Throughout the discussion, we delved deep into the fundamental values of SDGs and how collaborative efforts can pave the way toward the most sustainable future. It's been a really inspiring to witness different perspectives, different approaches in the name of fun. So as we conclude today's webinar, I urge each and every one of you to carry forward and stick level the playing field internally and externally. I also understand that collaboration starts internally before it goes externally. That is of utmost importance. I would also like to say that this webinar has been recorded with the consent of the participants. We will share on request. Also, there is a request in the chat box to have the slides, and with the consent of the panelists, we will be sharing the slides. Also, usually these webinars are uploaded on YouTube. So be on the lookout, search it so that you can be able to reflect. Once again, I am really grateful to the various panelists and those that joined us online. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening further.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.